Okay, that's the meeting recording. So I'm now going to take the sederant of the Hamilton Area Committee on Wednesday, the 17th of November 2021. Councillor Burns? No. Councillor Callaghan? No. I can see that we have Councillor Carmichael present. Do we have Councillor Chalmers? Yes, I can. Thank you, Councillor Chalmers. Councillor Craig?
Apologies.
Thank you. I can see that we have Councillors Devlin, Donnelly, Falconer and Horn present. I have apologies from Councillor Hose. Councillor Lowe? No. I can see that we have Councillor McCready present. Do we have Councillor McGeever? No. I can see that we have Councillor McGuigan present. Do we have Councillor McLachlan?
Here.
Thank you. I can see that we have Councillors Nayland, Nelson, Razak, Ross and Thompson present. And do we have Councillor Wilson? No. Also in attendance today, we have Alistair Stewart from Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. We have a number of officers present: Rhonda Leaf, Anne Hopkins-Simpson, Laura Mitchell, Stephen Clark, myself, Elizabeth Ann McGonigal, Gillian Cochrane and Angela Norris. We also have some community reps present today. We have Maggie Gilfillan and David McInish from Strotherhill and Birkinshaw stakeholders, and Sandra Panton from Hill House, Udston and Burnbank stakeholders. And with that, I'll pass you back to the Chair to commence today's business. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Elizabeth Ann. And I'll now move to the declaration of interest. Has anyone got a declaration of interest? No, I don't see any hands up. I'll move now to the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 3 to 8, and I'll move that's a correct record of the previous meeting. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. Items for noting. I'm now moving to item 3, which is the detector legislation, and I'm going to invite Alistair Stewart, the station commander from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, to deliver a presentation. Thank you, Stuart. Alistair. Sorry.
Common mistake, don't worry about it.
Sorry about that, Alistair.
It's hello everyone, good afternoon. I'll be as concise and as prompt as I possibly can with this, so I'm going to share my screen with you, and obviously it's in relation to what Councillor Donnelly was talking about there. Picture paints 1,000 words, so I think we'll see if I can, if this works. All I really need is a thumbs up from someone to see that they can see that.
Yeah, I can see it.
Righty-ho. So really, I've been invited along, kindly invited along, to give you a wee bit of an overview of the fire detection guidance and legislation that's just kind of recently come to the fore. And hopefully allay any kind of fears that anybody may have. As I say, this isn't a particularly long presentation, so I'll kind of go through it, and I'm happy to take questions thereafter, unless you've got something really pressing that you need to ask. But you know, as I say, there's not a lot of slides here, but you know, we could take questions after it. So. The tolerable standard guidance: satisfactory fire detection, satisfactory carbon monoxide detection. That's the official name for it, that section. Give me a wee second. You can read that. So, yeah, so legislation has just come out in relation to a new element of the Housing Act in relation to the smoke and heat alarms and the standards expected in people's homes. You know, ultimately a tolerable standard is, as you can imagine, it's a basic level of repair for a property that must meet, you know, need to meet a certain standard to make it fit for somebody to live in. Now, we don't need to kind of think back too far to Grenfell incident, whereby had a tragic incident that raised a lot of issues and concerns about many things, and you can see there I've just kind of bulleted 2 or 3 of them there. So a working group was formed, and they made recommendations to bring forward a consultation on fire and smoke alarms, and basically it resulted in a legislation change, if you like, whereby there was an expectation, or there is an expectation, of homes now, domestic homes, properties, to have a particular standard of fire detection and heat detection within their homes. This was due to come out in February 2021, but due to COVID, that thing called COVID, it's now been extended to February 2022, when there's an expectation that all homes will have link detection, by that point. So certainly Fire and Rescue Service kind of got the ball rolling with that, and thought, agreed that we had to be part of this. As I say, part of it. There's a lot of expectation on homeowners and requirements of homeowners to carry out this work, not just the Fire and Rescue Service. So we started at the earliest opportunity. As you already know, we have been part of fire safety in the home for many years. This is an extension to what we're kind of currently doing. I'll kind of go over a couple of things with you as well. So the requirements of this new legislation clearly state that, based on the slide that you see there, 1 smoke alarm installed in every room frequently used, 1 smoke alarm in every circulation space, hallways and landings, a heat alarm in every kitchen. And they also mentioned about carbon monoxide detectors as well, where there's a carbon fueled appliance, which seems to make perfect sense. So what are these detectors? What should they be? What standards should they reach? Well, they can be tamper-proof, long-life lithium batteries, or mains wired. It says there they're cheaper. Everything has a cost to it, of course it does, but any mains wired alarms really should be fitted by a qualified electrician, into a specific standard. But battery operated link detection can be used as well. This is all set out in the tolerable standard guidance that anyone can read off the Gov.uk website. So in relation to the installation of smoke detection, so the occupant's responsibility is the owner to meet the smoke alarm standard. So it's not the Fire and Rescue's responsibility. It's the owner's responsibility, or the occupant's responsibility. Now, private rented properties, basically it's the landlord's responsibility. And for local authority housing, it will be, the local authority who have the power to carry out that work. So they'll look at their own housing stock and make their judgments and assessments based on, what their housing stock is. I spoke earlier on about the Fire and Rescue Service fitting interlinked alarms. We are assisting in this process. There are certain requirements, or there's certain criteria that people, or house owners or occupants, need to meet in order to achieve a high risk. So first of all, they need to be an owner-occupier, and they need to meet the criteria of the high risk based on the questions that we ask during our home fire safety visits. So a home fire safety visit would have to be conducted first. It's not a simple case of phone the fire service and they'll fit an alarm for you. No, we need to go through our own protocols for that. So we'd be looking to do a home fire safety visit in somebody's home. If their risk is a high risk, then we will make sure the criteria, double check the criteria is met. Then if they meet that high risk, we will fit interlinked smoke detection. I suppose that's really as simple as it gets. If a home, if somebody doesn't meet a high risk, we would never, ever leave a home without detection. I mean, that goes without saying. Now, they may not meet high risk, so we would not generally fit a link detection, but we will fit. We'll not leave anybody without detection, so we will fit single point alarms. So it keeps people safe, of course it does, but it is still the responsibility of the occupier to carry forward what the new legislation states. So the Fire and Rescue Service isn't the enforcing authority in this case. So we can't make somebody do it. We can simply just provide support and advice in relation to the interlinked alarms. But say only high-risk owner-occupied premises will have interlinked detection fitted. And that was quick. I think there's probably maybe a bit more value maybe in the questions that perhaps that you've got, and allowing for that kind of open forum. If everybody's okay with that, give me just a wee second. How can I stop sharing and show? Go like that. Now, 2 seconds. So is that me back on? Have I stopped sharing?
Sure, you've stopped sharing, Alistair.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll kind of open it out to yourselves, because I have absolutely no doubt that you'll have, one or two questions in relation to this. So it's kind of over to you, and I'll really try my best to kind of answer these to the best of my ability.
I'll open it up to the committee and invite people if they want to come in with any questions. Bert and then Jim.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. Always welcome. Just for my clarity, I might have missed it there. Who would you say ultimately is responsible, to make an enforcement these things getting fitted? Would that be the council? I take it, yes.
It'll depend on your personal circumstances. If you're an owner occupier, it's your responsibility. If you are council tenant, it's the responsibility of the local authority to identify what the needs are within their housing stock. If you're a private tenant, it'll then be the landlord who has the responsibility to ensure that their housing stock meets the tolerable standard. Does that answer your question?
It does. But just a wee add-on, if you don't mind, who then would be responsible for putting them in the likes of a private landlord? Can they claim money back in that, or is it their responsibility to pay for this installation?
I'm not quite grasping what you mean. Who pays for it?
Yeah, who
say? It'll be the landlord who is responsible to meet the standard. So. How that comes about, I don't know what contracts are signed, between landlords, private landlords, and tenants. That's entirely that's a kind of transaction between them. I probably couldn't answer that question in relation to that, but responsibility ultimately lies with the private landlord.
Okay, right. Thanks very much. You've answered that there. Thanks for your time. Thanks, Chair.
And you come, Jim. Thanks, Bert.
Thanks, Chair. Maybe it's following on to a certain extent of what Bert was getting at. So if it's an owner-occupier, it's obviously the owner-occupier's responsibility. If it's a landlord, it's their responsibility. What powers do the Fire and Rescue Service or anybody else have to ensure that the landlord has actually done what is required? And then the next question is in relation to the local authorities' housing stock. It's indicated there that it's our responsibility to put this system into all our houses. And I just want to pose the question, has that been done, or has that been started, or is it planned? And also, just on a final point, my understanding is that this is actually in relation to the property survey, which is actually done when somebody's actually selling their house. And at the moment, there is no firm obligation for somebody to have it done until such times as the insurance companies get wind of it and start making a regulation of renewal of policies or new policies being brought in. And that's me.
Thanks, Jim.
You might need to remind me what you put. And as I say, in relation to the local authority would, as I say, they'll make the assessment of their own housing stock. To decide who is who requires and who doesn't. There may already be link detection within properties. I would assume that full, and I have to assume because I don't know for sure, but I would assume the point which we got wind of, or we were notified of the legislation change, that the wheels would already have been in motion. I would have to say that South Lanarkshire Council have always been proactive in any field of safety, particularly fire safety. We've got a very good kind of rapport with the local authority, but the Fire and Rescue Service isn't the enforcing authority. It's not us that decide whether it is or not. We are supporting a legislation change, and by way of supporting it, we'll say, if we, in our normal course of work, decide that somebody meets that high risk, we will assist by installing. So we can't make somebody take it. And I think you're right, Jim, in relation to the kind of insurance companies and stuff. I don't think we'll know until such times as the kind of first query comes through, or there's an incident, and that question gets asked. I don't think we're at that stage yet, but I have no doubt at some point, that the questions will be asked. And really, that's kind of where we're at with that. We'll not know. And it is difficult when legislation comes out. The Fire and Rescue Service can merely give advice. We can't recommend anything in particular, like any brand name for smoke detection, for any link detection. We can simply just say, the requirement is that, but we can't direct anybody to a specific, company, for example, for that link detection. Jim, I think maybe you've got another wee point in there that I've maybe missed. So I don't know whether you want to come back in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was wanting to come back in, Alistair, from the point of view that obviously that I'm also on the Care and Repair board, and Care and Repair are actually active in trying to facilitate the members of the public in private houses who are looking to have this work done, because unfortunately, and maybe this is business, there's a lot of people running around who are grossly overcharging for this service, whereas the normal price might be something around about £150 to £250. There are people running around saying they'll do it for £500 to £600, and obviously that the reply to that is go and raffle yourself, and that this is obviously a potential that's there for people to misuse the situation, but certainly that I think that if people are sensible, they'll go to the proper authorities, namely yourselves, Alistair, Care and Repair, and also if it's a council house, then they get in contact with the council. So it's a case of be sensible out there and don't get taken in by the scammers.
I totally agree with that. We certainly when it comes to fire safety advice within the home, there's no better place to ask the question than the kind of subject matter expert in the Fire and Rescue Service. So from an advice point of view, absolutely, and we will, we look to keep people as safe as we possibly can. As I say, where we need to kind of limit the installation is, the people need to meet that certain criteria. What goes on beyond that, what goes on outside the Fire and Rescue Service advice, we're not in control of, which is a real shame, but we still, through our normal channels, deliver that safety message. So if anybody does have any kind of fears, a phone call, and you can actually do, your own kind of self-assessment, if you like, do your own risk rating, just to answer the questions, on the website. And it'll give you an idea whether you are or are not, high risk. But see, we would never leave anybody without detection.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's still the homeowner's responsibility. Mm-hmm. It's a hard one, and where do you draw the line, just in general terms? But we would never leave anybody in any vulnerable position.
Okay, very much appreciated, Alistair. Thank you.
Okay, Jim. I have a few hands up now. I've got, and I'll take it in this order. I've got Andy Carmichael, Kenny, McCreary, and Bert Thompson, and I have a guest who wants to say a few words. Maggie Gilfillan, and I'll take it in that order.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Alistair, as coincidentally, I had an inquiry from a homeowner this morning regarding this very subject, right? I'm quite glad to hear about this home fire safety visit where you assess the criteria, so to speak. What is the contact number that they need to call to get this in process?
If it's okay with you, Councillor, what I'll do is I can send that through to Elizabeth Ann, who can put it out on the whole distribution list. Would that help?
That would be great. Appreciate that.
I'll make sure all the appropriate links and contact details are there. And we'll get that sorted for you.
That'd be great.
I'll take that as an
Thanks
action.
very much. Much obliged to you. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Andy. Who did I say next? Did I say Kenny?
Yeah, you did. Thanks, Chip. Thanks, Alistair. Can I maybe ask a question? I also had an inquiry on Monday of this week from an elderly couple. One's, I think, 87 and the man's, I think, 93. So, but they're in their own home. They own their own home. So basically, how are they fixed? Are they going to have to, a couple of questions, are they going to have to pay for this themselves? And this may be a wee bit unfair asking you, it might be a social work question, but are they going to have to pay for it in your experience? And also, is there going to be a significant campaign to stop the scammers? I mean, Jim kind of touched on this, but I can imagine people going around knocking doors saying, "Hi, we're here to fit your smoke alarm. Can you give us a deposit, £100?" And you never seen them again. And elderly people may be taken in by this. So I just wondered what your thoughts on that would be and what your advice would be for that particular couple. Thanks.
Right, I'll start from the top on that one. In general terms, in relation to paying for the link detection, yes. However, if we go through the process of the home fire safety visit and request that, and we deem them to be high risk based on what their vulnerabilities, if they have any, but if there are specific vulnerabilities within that, when we carry out the home fire safety visit and they meet the criteria, then we would fit those free of charge, but only if they meet the criteria. But yes, ultimately, unless if they are a private, if they are owner occupied, yes, there is a requirement for them to pay for that themselves. It's their responsibility to do that. But see, this is where the kind of communication between owner occupiers and, say, the fire service, can be quite valuable. That way. Yes. However, if we do a home fire safety visit and it deems as being high risk, then we would fit, and that would be free of charge. In respect to your kind of final point there, talking to Councillor McGuigan there earlier on, I wonder at what point we decide, or we realise that there's a lot of scamming going out there, and this is where I think any stories of that sort have to be raised, and this is probably quite a good forum to start it off. And you know, and I think we have to raise that awareness if it's happening. There's not an awful lot we, as the Fire and Rescue Service, can do about it. But if we identified an issue in our normal course of work where somebody had come out with a comment to the effect that they believed they had been scammed, you know, we have got a duty of care to report that. You know, we all do, you know, as public servants to report that. And we can go through our normal forums, you know, and discuss that with the people that sit around about the table. And if it becomes a particular trend, then, yeah, it's something that we really need to look at closely. I mean, it's not just about keeping people safe from fire, it's about keeping people safe from crime. So if there's criminality involved, as I say, we've got a duty of care to actually report that. We all do. And I'm sure you all agree with that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just ask also just one quick question? So, if you don't mind, are you happy? You okay with me to go?
Okay, and you can.
With this couple that I've mentioned there, so would they be able, they won't be able to go on the internet, but would they be able to get somebody to go on the website on their behalf and find out the details? And is it live now?
Yes, and yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. I'll provide details, and then it can get distributed around the group.
Thanks, also. Thanks,
Yep.
Jay.
Okay, so can you take your hand down, Kenny, if that's you finish? Andy, is yours a legacy hand? Or will you want back in? That's fine. Maureen, I will call you. So I'm now going over to Maggie, who's a guest today at the area committee meeting. Maggie.
Hi, thanks for the invite today, by the way. I'm just really quite curious as to how these work with places of multiple occupancy, because these are becoming more and more, you know, within our communities now, you know, and I actually really worry about them, because not every landlord is, you know, up to date and things like that, or, you know, and actually I'm really worried about people in these multiple occupancy places. So if they haven't got this protection, would they be able to contact you? And would you need to mention who they were that did contact you?
Yeah. So if somebody living in a house of multiple occupation, the first port of call is their landlord. You know, they have a responsibility. That's their first point of contact. With it being an HMO, certainly a collective voice, I'm sure, would be an awful lot, you know, stronger. As I said before, Maggie, the Fire and Rescue Service isn't the enforcing authority. You know, this is legislation. There is a requirement, you know, for private landlords, you know, to carry this out. You know, and if they're deemed to be in breach of that, then they're liable. We're not. When I say not responsible, what I'm trying to say here is, you know, we're happy to give people advice, but ultimately the responsibility lies with that landlord. And you're right. Your concerns are absolutely, you know, justified. You know, it's trying to get out, get to everybody as soon as we can, because that message, where it might be advertised, you know, through kind of you know, television and social media and all the rest of it, there will be people out there who haven't quite got the message yet, and then we just need to continue to give that advice and say, you know, that here's what's happening. Now, what you need to understand as well is houses of multiple occupation are subject to fire safety enforcement. So when I say we're not the enforcing authority, what I mean by that is we wouldn't, under these circumstances, go out and fit the link detection, because it is the responsibility of the owner, and we would inform the owner of that requirement, but we wouldn't do the work for them. That is their responsibility. if that makes that. So from a fire safety enforcement, there's certain criteria in legislation that the owner of an HMO must meet by law, and that is communicated to them. So they've got, certainly we can give people advice, but certainly a collective voice from the occupiers would certainly help.
It's just that no, I don't even know if I can say this, but I'm going to. Not all landlords are above board, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, we do.
Aye, and that is a great concern. It's becoming, it's happening in more and more places now. It used to be it was maybe in the bigger cities and whatever, but you're actually finding it in the smaller outlying, towns and villages and things like that. I'm just wondering what kind of protection these people have got. A lot of them are, they don't always see the TV or whatever, or maybe English isn't their first language and things like that. And, they're very vulnerable, and
if these people request a home fire safety visit, what I was saying earlier on was that we would never leave anybody in any, at any risk in relation to fire. Now, it might not be linked smoke detection, but we would never leave anybody without detection. But if we identify any trends, then we raise that through our fire safety enforcement channels, and then we take we take action from that point. So we raise, if we have any concerns, we can raise that through our fire safety enforcement department, who would then carry forward under their normal daily work, to reinforce the requirements or the responsibilities of the HMO owner. Now, somebody in an HMO can still get a home fire safety visit, so that doesn't stop that from happening.
Yeah.
We would give them the suitable advice, but when it comes to linked to detection, kind of what we're talking about here, purely the responsibility of the owner. And I understand your concerns. I see where you're coming from, and we are we're sympathetic to that, and we're aware of certain situations where based on what you're talking about there.
Thank you.
You happy with that answer, Maggie?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
So you can refer them for a home safety visit, and then that can start the process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Chair, we have Councillor Chalmers followed by Councillor Falconer. And sorry to interrupt, but if I could just remind that guests are here to observe the meeting.
All right. I thought when you said there was a guest wanting to speak.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Right, Alan. Hold on. It was Maureen first, and then yourself, Alan. Okay.
Hi, Mary. It's a popular topic today. I had my hand up earlier, but Jim's certainly covered some of it. I was just wanting to check with Alistair. I know in home fire safety visits, particularly if it's a higher risk, you would make referrals to appropriate organisations. So do you still do that? And for example, would Care and Repair be an organisation you would refer someone to as an owner occupier if they needed a bit of assistance and support with this matter? So that's my first point for Alistair. And secondly, I know that there is quite a lot of concern for Consumer Trading Standards around scams in this area just now, and Trading Standards regularly promote stuff on their social media pages about current scams, and and it's really quite informative, and I know I've shared it in my own social media. So it might be worth, Chair, just a suggestion, might be worth asking Trading Standards to come and give us an update on some of that at a future meeting. But just the question there for Alistair. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Maureen. Elizabeth Ann, can we get in touch with Trading Standards and ask them to come along to a future meeting?
I can certainly make inquiries, Chair.
That would be great. Alan, if you want to come in.
Aye, thanks, Chair. It's just in regard to frail elderly. We know that the council at House in the last meeting I did ask the question, but the House and getting in touch with the their tenants who are frail elderly and providing that service. But I'm thinking more to the frail elderly who are registered with getting social work services. Are you linking up with them so that private homeowners of frail elderly are getting referred for social work to take up the service? And I have another question here once I get that one.
Okay.
That. Yep, that links to Maureen's question there. Absolutely. We actually go beyond fire risk if we identify any additional risks within the home. So regardless of the topic about linked smoke detection, stuff like that, if we identify additional risks within the home, yes, we have a referral process, and it can go quite high. And by that I mean, if we believe that there is an adult support and protection issue, then we don't hesitate. We make referral to social work services. If, on the other hand, the risk isn't as high as that, for that would warrant what we call an AP1, we do have very good points of contact within South Lanarkshire, both with housing services, and Maureen, you mentioned Care and Repair there. We've got a fantastic link with Care and Repair, and we make these connections through the unintentional injury subgroup. Now, that's been a really valuable group to be part of, because not only can we communicate what we do, we also get almost like, the way I kind of describe it is, it's an opportunity for us to walk a mile in other person's shoes as well, whether that be social work, NHS, education services, Care and Repair, Seniors Together, so there's a plethora of people round about the table. But yes, so the referral processes in relation to fire safety won't change. That doesn't change. We still communicate the risk to the appropriate people. We don't just go in the door with blinkers on and consider fire safety as being the only thing that we're interested in. No, that's not the case. It's slip, trips and falls. It's general safety, not just within the home, but see in the kind of curtilage of the home. We consider that as well. So yeah, absolutely, we maintain these partnership referrals as we go along, regardless of whether we're talking about linked smoke detection or not. So that continues. And what I have to say to you is, on a monthly basis, and just to put this into perspective about how much we get involved in this, on a monthly basis, we process in the region of 120 referrals. Now, that's referrals that have come into the fire service, and then there's outputs, so we provide that safety advice, but it's reciprocal. So it's approximately, on average, about 120 referrals every single month, from partner agencies. And as I say, it goes back and forward all the time. So it'd be great to be in everybody's house, and somebody in every street corner. It's just not practical, is it? But those, and this is where you come in as well as local elected members, and those who know your constituency the best, is if you identify these vulnerabilities, let us know. Let us know. We have a dedicated community action team out there who, will come out and see and discuss about many, many things, not just about fire risk. We're talking about falls as well. We've got a link to the falls team at Coatbridge. We get great referrals as well. So that, as I say, that's referrals in deaf services. Where do you want me to stop? But in answer to your question, yes, all the referral processes are maintained, and we continue to seek those who are at high risk within the community. And if we can do just that wee bit to help, we will.
Thanks for that, Alistair. Okay, Alan.
Hi, Chair. Just one piece of information. Just when Alistair was mentioning about people knowing about this forthcoming activity, I mean, the council have at their fingertips the address of every household in South Lanarkshire. So any information we put and send there, because we send out council tax letters every year, so they've got the address of every household in South Lanarkshire. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I said earlier on, certainly when it comes to fire risk, if South Lanarkshire Council housing services, we've got a very, very good relationship with them. I have absolutely no doubt and every confidence in housing services and South Lanarkshire Council that, you know, systems and mechanisms will be in place as we speak, you know, to consider this new legislation.
I'm sure it is, Alistair. But thanks very much for your presentation. I think it was very informative, and I'm sure a lot on the committee have taken a lot of food for thought and will operate that in terms of reporting where they do feel that there is vulnerable people within their wards. But thank you very much for your attendance, Alistair, and it was very informative. Okay, you don't need to stay on for the rest of the area committee meeting.
I appreciate that, Chair, and thank you very much for your time. And as I say, Elizabeth Ann, if you're okay, I'll send through all the contact details and all the appropriate information. And if you could put that through the distribution kind of lines, be much appreciated.
That would be great, Alistair. Thank you. And thank you
very
for
much.
your time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
The next item on the agenda is item 4, which is the neighbourhood planning update, pages 9 to 36. And I'm going to invite Rhonda Leith to speak to this and also advise the committee that we have guests here in regards to this subject. We've got Maggie Gilfillan from Strotherhill and Birkinshaw, who's one of the stakeholders, David McCanish, Strotherhill and Birkinshaw stakeholders, Sandra Panton, Hill House, Hudson and Burnbank stakeholders, and Anne Hopkins Simpson from Rhonda's team is also going to be in attendance to help the community members. Over to you, Rhonda.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to update the area committee on the work around neighbourhood planning and also to present you with the annual reports for the established areas within the Hamilton locality. And if I just take you through the report, section 3, I know you're all very familiar with the background now from previous discussions, but this is in response to a legislative requirement through the Community Empowerment Act for the Community Planning Partnership to work with smaller areas to produce plans, but also in response to desire within South Lanarkshire to do this in a way that goes beyond the legislation and make it meaningful and productive and really involve local people, both in the planning process and in the delivery of the priorities they identify. So section 4 takes you through the progress to date, including the annual reports, a summary for the initial 3 areas, which were Hill House, Udston and Burnbank, and Strotherhill and Birkinshaw in phase 1, and then also Fair Hill, which was completed last year. And you'll see there in my screen just frozen slightly, 4.3 in the report, some of the kind of highlights from the annual reports that are attached as appendices, including the number of people who were involved in participatory budgeting in Hill House, Udston and Burnbank, almost 900 people, and a particularly challenging year for engagement because of all of the COVID restrictions. The progress that Strotherhill and Birkinshaw have made around progressing 8 of their local priorities, and in Fair Hill, particularly the way the community pulled together throughout the pandemic and provided support to each other and made sure that everybody was cared for within the Fair Hill community. We've also got work going on in Blantyre. So a few years back, there was the Blantyre plan produced, Blantyre Futures, with support from Coalfields Regeneration Trust. And they've subsequently reallocated the resources. So they've kind of moved on to focus on different areas. And obviously pandemic work has been happening in between. So there's now quite a bit of activity in Blantyre around refreshing that plan and looking at the priorities and working with the community to make sure that it's current and up to date in terms of actions. So you'll be seeing reports on that from next year going forward. And it's probably also worth mentioning the Larkhall partnership work, which we're supporting as well, which focuses on the whole of Larkhall and has produced a plan for the whole area. And we're working alongside them too. In section 5 of the report, you'll see that we're now doing some work in Whitehill. It's been a wee bit slower than normally, and our pre-pandemic perhaps is better than normal to use. We would have expected, because it's been difficult to engage face-to-face with communities for long periods of time. But we do have the survey open there. We've had some good responses already, and we're now able to undertake some face-to-face engagement. So the team have been out this week with support from the community, and next week as well, doing door knocking and speaking to people in Whitehill, and continuing obviously to maintain the work in the other areas that we're reporting on this year. So at a final point then in 5.3, we're starting to look at how we bring together the neighbourhood planning areas and other areas and representative community groups across Hamilton locality to talk about identifying shared priorities and linking them more closely into the community planning partnership. So that's a piece of work that we're beginning to develop. We've had initial discussions with some of the community groups, and we've got plans for a meeting which all the stakeholder groups, community councils and so on have been invited to at the end of the month to look at how we start to really move that forward. And as you said, Chair, we've obviously got some guests here from some of the areas as well. I'm happy to take any questions, and I'm sure they would be as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Rona. I'm going to open it up to the committee if anybody wants to speak on behalf of the report.
Chair, we have Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillors Chalmers and Falconer.
All right, I see the hands now. Okay, Bert and then Maureen.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Welcome the report. Involved in it myself, and I'm always a believer in community involvement. But what I have found over the years, and it's no disrespect, and it seems to be the same people involved in every committee, every group, everything going. How can we encourage other people to get involved? And I'm thinking here especially young people and maybe businesses, to see them getting involved and encourage other people to come in. We welcome the people that are there. As I say, I think sometimes just a wee bit maybe the same people. The other thing is engagement. It has been difficult, but chatting the doors again, I'm really encouraged to hear that. And moving forward. And the last wee thing, participatory budget is important, but I think we've got to be realistic, let people know that sometimes, I mean, I've had people ask me, a sports centre, can it be done with participatory budget? No, I'm sorry, it can't. So we've got to maybe be realistic and tell people what we can and can't do, and the money involved as well. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments, Bert. Maureen?
Mary, I would just like to ask our guests, if I could, if they could say what was the big absolute plus, what was the kind of benefit of doing all the work they've done, the big, most enjoyable thing they did, and what one big challenge, what was their challenge? Okay,
good questions. Well, I'll put it over to the guests now if they want to answer those questions that Maureen's just put. Who wants to go first, Maggie?
Can I speak now?
Yes, you can speak now.
Right. I don't want to
You've been invited. You've been invited.
I don't want to get into trouble. I think I usually do. I think it's great that with OPOP, I think the main point with AIM is we're actually getting things done. People are starting to take notice that things are getting done. You know, they're not just being spoken about and then sidelined, or it's in the minutes, you know, years down the line type of thing, because I've seen that happen. But I mean, it's great to see all that happening. But it's like the councillor said, it's the same faces and the same faces, you know. I mean, I've tried for years to get the community involved, you know, different members, things like that. But it's something that's eluding me even, you know. And I do know we've got the ladies for OPOP. They've chapped every door in this scheme, you know. I mean, they're hard workers. They really put their heart and soul into it, you know. And I love to see that. because even if we can only just get maybe a few different faces, you know, it's shown that their work is, you know, it's getting there. Folk are taking recognition. They're like, who is this strange woman chatting my door? You know, but they're listening, you know. And I've actually had people saying to me, who was going to run the scheme today? You know, but that was only at the beginning because they all know Liz and that now. And it's actually quite funny, you know. But it's great, and we're getting there. We're getting things done. The place, it'll get to look good again, and it will get to feel good again. Because I was born and raised in this scheme, you know, and know that I'm not old, you know, but I mean, when I heard that it was a deprived area, I was in tears at that meeting. I was so embarrassed. I was trying to hide my face and all the rest of it because it was a shock to me, you know, because this used to be a scheme where nobody went without, nobody. If a family was struggling that, the other ones pulled together and helped them, you know, and there was no need to be shy because nobody had anything. We were on the same boat, but we never thought we were in a deprived area. Know what I mean? So that was a huge shock to me, but I'm just happy that OPOP is in here helping us and we're getting things done now.
That's great, man.
Brilliant. Thanks, Maggie.
Yeah. Sandra, you want to say something?
Good afternoon, everybody. Just to really agree, nearly saying the same as Maggie there with regards to OPOP and inclusion through along with community link support. We've been in place now for a good few years with Hill House, Udston and Burnbank. There has been a lot of difficult times. These priorities, and they come up time and time again, and they've always tended to be around the same thing. The last couple of years obviously has proved that people's priorities can change very quickly. And it's been well noted this year. And there are more voices now up here than ever we've had before. We've been lucky enough that we can do a lot of outdoor work, so restriction-wise, it never stopped us working through the restrictions, and we've still been able to do everything that we wanted to do as a group. But the people themselves, we've noticed a big, big difference in as to where you're saying it's the same faces. And it was the same thing for us as well for a long, long time. It's been the same faces. This past year, we've never seen as many different faces, people in different circumstances, but all wanting to help. And that's the biggest, I mean, through all the work we've done and things we've managed to achieve, there's never been a better feeling of seeing people interested in asking what's happened. Has somebody been seen to what's happening there? And I think that's the biggest thing we've taken out of this year.
That's fantastic report, Sandra.
No, thanks, Sandra.
I see Alan's got his hand up and Rhonda's got her hand up. Alan, do you want to come in?
If you don't mind, Chair, just a couple of points. I would need to agree with Sandra about the amount of involvement of different people through her organisation, the Community Council, SOC, elderly groups and young groups, and a lot of people. There's been a previous member of the Hill House Community Council for 10 years. I'm quite delighted in the way the communities got together in COVID and doing things. For Maggie, I feel sorry for you, but in Hill House, unfortunately, we've had urban aid, SIT and regeneration, and we're now into our place, our plan. But there's a couple of points I want to raise. And the first one is just a wee bit of information regarding the report for Hill House and Burnbank, and it's the priorities. And I think it might be worthwhile the chair or the secretary sending a copy of that report to Joanne Forbes, who's at present doing a consultation in the unwarranted community transfer of one of our main assets. Because if we look at this report, priority 1, more leisure and social opportunities, which the sports barn and the FitBA provide. 3, physical environment improvements, which we hope to achieve in the sports barn. and 10 health improvements, community sports hub. As I say, it might be an idea. Joanne, as a senior officer, is taking part in a consultation with an unwanted bid for a group for Blantyre as part of that consultation. One of my main points is in 8, better financial well-being, and I see the CABA involved again, and I hope that's a freebie. But I've gone to a few meetings in the Gilmore Whitehall Parish Church and groups like Salt and the Resident. Food parcels not going out, and I know we had it last year about benefits advice. So I was quite shocked last week to find out that Money Matters, whose main object is to maximise people's income, 55 of their staff are budgeted £2 million, now under the same management structure as Rhonda and the community engagement team. Why they aren't out in the community doing like Strathclyde region used to do, is getting a benefits check to make people aware and make sure they'll get the maximum money, because they're still having people having to get food parcels to get by. There's a bit of a slight on us as a council, the whole council, by the way. I just think that might be an idea to pursue that. Okay, thanks.
Right, Alan. Rhonda?
Thank you very much, Chair. If it's okay, I was just going to respond to a couple of Councillor Thompson's points and then one of Councillor Falconer's, if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. So I think that the first point Councillor Thompson was making was about involving people, and we all know that can be a challenge, and it's been a challenge in the last year because of the lack of face-to-face activity. For some people, online has been easier to, but not for everybody, and we recognise that. But one of the ways that we do that is through recognising that, folk want to in different ways as well. So it's not necessarily about everybody wanting to come to a stakeholders meeting and be there all the time, but how do you get them to have their voice heard? And that's where the kind of engagement consultation work comes in. So we do set ourselves quite a high bar. Certainly in terms of kind of other areas that we've looked at, of making sure that a minimum of 40% of households in areas are involved in consultation before we'll say a plan's ready to be produced. And then it's working with partners who have contact with, for example, young people, so through schools and through the youth programmes like Terminal 1 and so on, and using them to gather young people's opinions back. And in Blantyre again, we're linking in closely with the town centre planning in terms of engagement with businesses and so on. So that will look very different in every community, because every community will be different, but we are doing as much as we can to make use of the resources and the different ways of engagement and involvement for people to spread the net as widely as we can with them. And I just wanted to clarify when I was speaking about PB as well, I'm only speaking in terms of this about the small pot of money that we have for what you'll see reported on as place-based participatory budgeting. So it's just over £40,000 across the area, but we use it to kind of seed fund small local projects and just a little bit of money to get things kick-started across the areas, rather than the large PB process, which I sometimes obviously brings its own challenges and a different way of working for communities. If you don't mind, if I just moved on to Councillor Falconer, just to say, in terms of community asset transfer, there is a legal process the council is required to follow, and I'm happy to get some information on what the requirements are, if that would be useful, to make sure that people understand why things are sometimes being done. And obviously I couldn't really comment on Money Matters because that's not my service area, but hopefully that answers a couple of the queries that have came up. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Chair, could you say thanks to Rhonda there? I appreciate that reply. And at the end of the day, it's always about the community as far as I'm concerned. So thank you. Thanks, Chair.
I know that, Bert. I see I've got Anne Simpson Hopkins would like to come in as well.
Chair, can I just respond to Councillor Faulkner's point about Money Matters and ongoing neighbourhood planning work? We've been in negotiation with Money Matters, and they're going to be offering a very kind of informal service at the Burnbank Cafe on a Friday, at the Hub Cafe on a Thursday, and Sandra and others are involved in developing a kind of drop-in cafe that will be developed in the new year. And if it is a demand or a need that's expressed by community members, I'm sure Money Matters will offer support to that cafe or that drop-in as well. So they will be coming along to the cafes. And the approach is very informal there, because people come obviously for social contact and for food assistance if they require it, and for other wraparound services. And we're really promoting the hub model through neighbourhood planning. We had a community cafe in Strotherhill as well up until COVID hit, because we find that people are much more inclined to kind of take up services if they're delivered in appropriate ways and on people's terms. The days of having, public events with stalls and displays around the edges of the rooms and hoping that community would come and engage with services and take up advice or support are well gone, as far as I'm concerned. And we realise that the hub model, where a neighbourhood planning is fundamentally about relationship building and building connections between local people and those delivering services. So it's critical that, we set faces to names, we bring workers out where communities are meeting and where individuals need support. We're also relying heavily on our community volunteers and the members of the OPOP groups, because they're the eyes and ears. They live and breathe in the communities that we're trying to serve. So they're pivotal to the success in terms of, effective engagement with services. It's very interesting as well, because we've gone through a process, and the process is still ongoing in the Hill House, Hudson Burnbank area, where we've asked people, and we do this annually anyway, normally as part of, the big public PB events that we're able to host around the place-based participatory budgeting. We would ask local people to help us re-rank the 10 priority themes within their neighbourhood plan, given that we're not able to host the events the way we would ideally want to. We've used some survey work and some direct engagement to gauge the opinions of other, of the general public, because it's critical. And Sandra made a very valid point as well about, things have changed quite fundamentally for people. We see that when, we were engaging with them and working with them. But in terms of the neighbourhood planning priorities, it's very interesting, because health is creeping right up in terms of, maybe going from the 10th priority up to the 3rd. Financial well-being in one of the areas is going from the 7th priority, no surprise, to the 3rd. Things are shifting because people's lives and experiences are shifting. But I think that's neighbourhood planning. Do you know what I mean? It's not just about coming up with a 10-year plan and letting it sit on a shelf and fester a bit. It's very much about the actions and what we call collectively. And when I say we, I mean the stakeholder group members. We talk about the deliverables, and the deliverables are key so that people can see and feel the change that we all want to see in the neighbourhoods where, things need to change the most.
Absolutely, Anne. I think I couldn't echo more the comments that you've just made. And I think the communities do see that the hubs are working, and they can come in and take as they want, what they want out of that, or give as much as well. So it's a two-way street in a way that was maybe not there before. So yeah, it is very good. And the volunteers, I can't commend them enough. The work that the volunteers do, it's amazing. The role, and then they see a wee gap and they say we have to get in there. So they play the pivotal role in how the hubs develop, and I can't commend them enough. Now I see that Alan wanted to come back in, and then I've got Maureen Devlin wanted to say a few words as well.
Thanks, Chair. Just a point in it, which was raised with Rhonda. The thing about the consultation, right? There's an assumption that everybody's got access to online and that, and a lot of people have, and a lot of we have access to every household in South Lanarkshire. I press a button that we can let people know we're doing a consultation. Do they want to participate, or do they know, or how do they want to participate? And we can maybe do that. On the other point, I notice on page 39, total PB spend for the schools, £255,000. There's an issue raised. Alan,
we're not on the schools. This is somebody
on the report.
That's the next part. That's the next part of the report. This is to do
with the same report.
This is to do with, no, this is to do with the neighbourhood planning update. The schools is on the education resource report.
It says neighbourhood planning, page 93. Sorry.
It's on 5, item 5.
Actually takes to do with the PB in this, because at a recent Hull House Community Council meeting, there was issues raised about how the participatory budget grants were allocated. You could see there were 13 grants in, and only 3 were passed. And there was some concern at that meeting, the Hull House Community Council meeting.
Alan, what are you referring to? What grants?
The participatory budget grants. It says in the Hull House report, out of 13 applications, there was only 3 given. All right? Maybe I'll get that one.
What page are you on?
On page 3 of the Hull House and Hudson Burn Bank paper. 13 proposals submitted, 3 fully funded. 4th bottom line. Okay, and the Community Council was how it's decided. And how this ties in with the schools, if you would just bear with me, is that some of these were submitted by the schools. So, and I've no objection to that. But the schools get 2 bites of the PB cherry because they're applying to the main fund, and then they're allowed to apply to the other fund where they've got $250,000. And if you'd let me know how that works, so I can let the Community Council know. Thank you.
I think it's a separate fund. Rhonda, can you help me?
Certainly. Just to reassure Councillor Falconer, we have approached Hull House Community Council and we'll meet with them to discuss any issues that they have, because I know you've mentioned this previously. I think the interesting thing to note is actually the school projects weren't successful in the community small PB process as well. So they had, certainly as stakeholders, they had the right to put forward a project. But in that particular case, the community decided themselves that there were other projects that they wished to fund with the amount of money that was available there.
Right. Okay, Annie, you want to come back in?
If that's okay, Chair. Point of clarity for Councillor Faulkner. In terms of the place-based PB, that happened before the money was then made available through the 1% local authority monies. So it was kind of 2 separate processes. Rhonda's right, which she said the school projects weren't successful, but in every area where there's established neighbourhood planning, particularly the pilot areas, post the PB processes are not a process that begins and naturally ends in a period of time. It's a kind of ongoing process where certainly you're right in what you say. There were 13 proposals, 3 were successful because, £7,000 only goes so far. And that's what PB is about. It's about asking the community to identify what in effect their priorities are and how they want the money invested. But it'd be folly to can actually go to the community and say we are asking for PB proposals around a particular theme or a number of themes, and then basically leave the unsuccessful projects and not support them. So as part of the process, we always have meetings with the lottery and with BASLAN, and we also explore any other funding options that may be available to each applicant, because we want to engage with people in the long term. It's not about one-off activities, and the consultations aren't limited either, because the consultation around neighbourhood planning, there's consultations ongoing all the time about a whole range of things, and that's about continually trying to widen representative and democratic involvement in the process. So we would certainly look at each of the project proposals, and when I say we, I mean the stakeholder group involving the community primarily and other stakeholders, other people who are delivering services in the area or whatever. So the conversation continues and we try to identify funding, because if it's a good idea, it's a good idea. So we want to make, bring that idea to life. And it might take a bit longer. The PB process might make some things happen. It might spur the delivery of an activity. But then you have to talk about sustainability as well. So we have all those conversations because we don't want things to be one-off. We want them to have a long-lasting impact and bring positive outcomes to the people in the areas that we're working in.
Right, I do understand now what Alan was talking about, and that was the £7,000 that OPOP asked for contributions to how that should be spread and spent. And I can only say that the Hill House Community Council have got a place on that OPOP meeting, so they can participate like all other stakeholders. They are a stakeholder, so they can participate, Alan. And they chose not to be there when that decision making was being made. So maybe we need to be a wee bit stronger in getting them to participate.
Chair, they will be participating in the future because they're unhappy with the way it was done. Thank you.
That's fine. That's their right to participate. Okay, I'm now moving on.
Chair, apologies, Chair. We have raised hands from Councillor Devlin and Councillor Thompson.
Sorry, Maureen, I did actually see your hand, so I do apologise. I'll bring you in and then I'll bring Mo in.
Right. To be quite honest, Mary, I'm quite confused about this committee. There's people coming on here and they're speaking, and no disrespect to them, I don't know who they are. I don't know, no disrespect to Anne Hopkins Simpson. I don't know if she's an officer or a member of the public. The other two that have came, there's one lady, Maggie Gilfillan. I haven't a clue. I don't know who these individuals are. I think people should be introducing who they are and where they're coming from. Because I represent a ward that doesn't have neighbourhood connections in the manner that a lot of the areas have, I don't know who they are. I have no idea. I'm sitting here. I'm getting ready to log off because this is actually it's quite disconcerting what's going on here.
Right, I can only apologise. Anne is an officer in regards to OPOP that's working in the pilot areas, and you know Rhonda Leith. Rhonda is
I'm well aware who Rhonda is because Rhonda has came to most of the committees, but there's other people on and coming in and speaking, and I haven't a clue who they are or where they're coming from. And the one thing I have to say, I was always led to believe that members of the public do not engage. They can sit and listen at what goes on at committees, but they cannot talk at committees, and I don't think that policy has been changed.
Well, there was only Maggie was invited to speak because of the report, and if they wanted to add anything to the report that Rhonda was given. So I do apologise if that misguided you in any way, Maureen. You have my sincere apologies. That if I didn't introduce people, I do apologise for that.
Chair, I don't know if Anne wants to come back in on that point.
Okay. Right, in you come, Anne.
Sorry, I think my hand was held up from the last point. But introductions were made at the start of the meeting, sorry, and I thought that would suffice.
Yeah,
so apologies, I should maybe just have said I'm Anne Hopkins Simpson from the Community Engagement Team. And I extended an invite at the request of Rhonda to bring our community activists along to contribute to the discussion and to just talk a wee bit about their experiences of being involved in the POP.
I did think I had introduced everybody on my programme, but I will be polite and apologise. I'll apologise, Maureen. I did actually introduce the speakers that were here today and the ones that were going to be guests. Right, we're moving on. Rhonda, you doing the participatory budget and education? No, it's not. Education resources and the Pupil Equity Fund. And I'm going to invite Laura Mitchell to speak to this paper.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Laura Mitchell. For those that don't know me, I'm Quality Improvement Officer for Education with responsibility for equity. I'm delighted to be here today to give you an update on participatory budgeting within education resources with regards to the pupil equity funding, and we're asking the area committee to note the progress today. So schools within the Hamilton area have allocated £255,013.94 towards participatory budgeting, and this is from their £3.12 million of their pupil equity funding allocation. So Appendix 1, which you can find on page 39 of your committee report, kind of outlines that, and also gives the split of what each of the learning communities within the Hamilton area have given towards that, have allocated towards that. Moving on to Appendix 2, which is on page 40, you can see that the majority of the schools have, so that's about 87.8% of schools have allocated the minimum of their 5% of their pupil equity funding. Some schools have allocated a little bit more, with 3 schools in particular committing as much as 10% of their pupil equity funding allocation. And if you move on to Appendix 3, which starts on page 41 and finishes on page 46, on each of those pages there's a further breakdown for each of the learning communities, which gives a school-by-school allocation, what each school has allocated in terms of their participatory budgeting amount, as well as a percentage of what that equates to from their total PEF budget for 21-22. So hopefully that's helpful in giving the figures for what schools have allocated. Schools have then undertaken a rigorous consultation process with stakeholders, which has been led by a participatory budgeting stakeholder group within each school. And within that group, there has been a representative of pupils, some parents involved in the group, and a couple of staff members. It's their responsibility to then gather ideas from all stakeholders across the school. And our schools have done this in a variety of ways. Some schools had outdoor parent coffee sessions. Some schools used Google Forms to gather things in. Other pupils went round classes, gathered that information. Some got them at registration classes in the secondary schools. And they did it in a kind of variety of ways to gather those kind of ideas of what would be good ideas for this spend. Once they had got selected their ideas and decided on between 3 and 5 ideas, then the school engaged stakeholders in the voting process, and they really they did a lot of marketing with stakeholders to try and get as much of the votes as possible. They did this in a variety of ways. Some schools went down an electronic version. Most of our secondary schools did an electronic forum because of the vast numbers of pupils and parents and staff involved. That was the best way to get as wide a reach as possible. But a lot of our primary schools opted for some more paper-based and hands-on voting processes. For example, some primary schools put up a display which had all the different options up, and the pupils could go and visually put a sticker up or a lollipop in the stick about which vote they wanted. So we had lots of interesting ideas about how each school engaged with that. And Appendix 4, which is on page 47, gives you the split of votes. So across the Hamilton area, 77% of our pupils voted for what they wanted to spend this minimum of 5% on, and an average of 75% of staff voted. We don't have the percentage for parents because it was quite difficult to quantify this, particularly families come in all shapes and forms. Some have got kind of split families and things, so it's quite difficult for schools to quantify how many families they actually have. But across Hamilton area, there were 2,943 families voted. So we've got a good number of people that voted. And in general, the vote was 71% of pupils, and 19.6% of the vote was parents, and 9.2% of the vote was school staff. So our pupils really have had a voice here, and they really have been able to get their ideas forward and vote for what they think is right. We've given them quite a lot of support. We've set up a Microsoft Teams page for our participatory budgeting leads. These are the people that have led this in their schools. We've offered support, we've answered their questions on that kind of electronic platform, and we've also signposted them to some good practice. So some of our schools, for example, created a PowerPoint which they shared with parents. Some created some posters and infographics that they shared across their community, and we posted these ideas which schools could then use and adapt for their own environment. We also used our @SLC Equity Twitter feed, and if you follow us, you will have seen lots of participatory budgeting examples being tweeted and retweeted there. So that's been a good way that we've been kind of sharing the ideas. Appendix 3 also gives an outline, a school by school, of what was actually voted for. So there's been a wide range of different things, ranging from outdoor kind of resources to water fountains and reusable bottles. Some schools have been paying for transport for extracurricular clubs, for example, pupils that are bused to school, extracurricular clubs, there aren't buses running after that, so for pupils to be able to engage in these things, they need to put on extra transport and things, and that was seen as some of the barriers. So it's been really interesting to see what some of the votes are, and there's a school by school breakdown in the appendix here, so you can see which each school has voted for. So schools are very much now progressing this spend to ensure that it's spent in full by the end of the financial year. We are supporting them with this. Obviously, with this being pupil equity funding money, we've got to make sure that the spend is really targeted to our pupils that are affected by poverty. And we're now asking schools to give a clear rationale for this spend, and also to provide us with a clear outcome and measure about how they're going to report on the impact of this spend by the end of the year. So they're in the process of doing that just now, and we as an equity team will support them with that. We're also in the process of gathering some good practice case studies of actual real examples of how schools have started this process, how they've implemented it, and hopefully at the end of the year we'll be able to include the impact of the project as well at the end of that, and we can share that with you at a future area committee. So that's a kind of whistle-stop tour of the participatory budgeting process in education. I'm quite happy to take any questions or answer any queries that you have.
Thank you for that report. It's very comprehensive, Laura, and I can only really take my hat off to the children that have participated and made sure that their voice was heard. That's all augurs well for the future, that they're really taking this and running with it. I see Bert's got his hand up.
Yep, okay.
Can you come, Bert? I can't hear you, Bert. You're muted.
Hello. Can you hear me now, Chair?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Right. Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. What I'm going to say here, this is not meant as any nastiness or anything. Just in general, I find with 20 years of the council now that sometimes, and this is how the public perceive us, is that they ask for something, and once they've asked, it's a case of we tell them how to live without it. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen, because I know a lot of hard-working people here. Can I just ask with schools, with the money they've got, can they actually employ MD, a part-time teaching assistant, for example, or can you use that money for play equipment? Are these sort of things included? Another thing is, can we, the area committee, maybe get a report at the end of the year just saying what projects have been successful, what they actually are, and how much they cost, just as we know what's happening out there? Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert. Laura?
Thank you. Yes, some of our schools with their pupil equity funding money do employ other staff, including teachers. Because the participatory budgeting part of that is only 5%, that sometimes hasn't been enough money to maybe look at some of the staff resources, because obviously that costs quite a lot of money. But the majority of our schools, with the other 95% of the pupil equity funding, are absolutely employing staff, YSL workers, Barnardo's workers, support staff, teachers, etc., etc. There are a number of schools have looked at play-based approaches and sort of some outdoor learning resources, and that has been identified as spend. And all the approaches that are identified in Appendix 3 are the ones that are going to be going ahead and which schools will be spending on. And we ask schools to report at the end of the financial year on their actual spend for the Pupil Equity Fund, and we will have a breakdown for what that participatory budgeting part looks like, and absolutely we can share that with you sort of between sort of April and June time at the area committees at that point. No problem to do that.
That would be great. Laura, you've still got your hand up there. Do you want to come back?
No, I'm okay. Thanks very much for that. So,
okay?
Plenty of clarity in the answers there, so thank you.
And you've got a report to look forward to when Laura presents it. Anyone else wanting to come in?
No further hands, Chair.
No further hands. Okay, I'm going to move on to, I think, we're now dealing with the items for decisions, and I'm going to move on to item 6, which is the application P/21/0340, demolition of timber shed and erection of garage, store, pages 49 to 60. And I'm going to invite Stephen Clark to speak to that.
Good afternoon, councillors. For those that don't recognise this face, I'm Stephen Clark. I'm the planning team leader for the East team of South Lanarkshire Planning and Economic Development Services, which encompasses the Hamilton area remit. This application is presented to you this afternoon because of the number of objections received. You'll note that 10 have been received in relation to it. The property itself, Fairholme Orchard, commands a relatively isolated location, although it is located to the west of Larkhall, and access to it is gained by a private single-width access track. The appropriate policies for the application are summarised at the first page of the report, with a further detailed explanation of these policies and the relative considerations being provided in section 3 of the report. The proposed garage is relatively big. It has approximately 120 square metres of floor space, which equates essentially to 4 double garages in rough, simplistic terms. That itself, the site is of a rural setting. It's of an agricultural, semi-time, part-time, if you want to call it that, holding, and buildings of that size footprint are not unusual in the rural area, especially at farm buildings. You will see the report, which I believe is a comprehensive summary of all main issues, details in section 5, the representations that have been received. A number of these, I would point out, are not material to the determination of the planning application, such as potential disruption or deterioration to a private road. Section 6 brings together the conclusions and all relevant planning aspects of the report, and you will note that all aspects considered, the recommendation is to issue consent, subject to the conditions listed in the report. I hope that's a concise enough summary, and I would welcome any questions that members may have.
Thank you for that, Stephen. I'm going to move the report. Is there anybody wanting to speak to the report? Or can I get a seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to move the report now. So I move.
I seconded, Chair.
Oh, so you did. Right, a brain freeze. Okay, so I'm moving on. So that's passed with no dissension. I'm going to move to item 7, which is the community grant applications, pages 61 to 64. And I am...
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Councillor Devlin has a raised hand. I don't know if it's in relation to this item or the previous item.
Okay.
No, it's in relation to this item, Mary.
Okay, Maureen, I'll take you then.
Right, thanks, Mary. It's actually with one of the, it's B with regard to Bogle and Uddickson Manshed. They've actually asked for equipment of 1,500 and we've only awarded them 250. the difficulty that we have with this now, this is a relatively new group in Bothwell and Uddingston. Now, we're having to depend on the St Bride's and Bothwell to accommodate them, just out of sheer courtesy and supporting the community. They're now, and the parish priest has been really, really good at accommodating everything. They're now looking at having to move down to the rugby and cricket area down in Uddingston, which again is a private club, because we do not have any community resources available within Bothwell and Uddingston to accommodate this group of people on a permanent basis. I think we've been quite mean in awarding them £250. They really should, as far as I'm concerned, they really should be getting the full amount to get themselves established, because it's actually it's quite popular, and trying to get resources within our area, and I'm sure Kenny will back me on this one, considering the fact as well that there's £32,500 and we've only got one more area committee that's getting carried over. So I'm proposing that we commit to the full amount for this Uddingston and Bothwell manshed, and I was hoping for a seconder. I haven't discussed it with anybody.
I'll second that, Chair.
Yeah. Elizabeth Ann, I know this is the 250 is the normal start-up.
Traditionally, £250 is a kind of guide that is given to start-up grants. Obviously, it is within members' right to suggest other amounts. So I'm
going to go to a vote. The proposed recommendation that Maureen has. Sorry to interrupt, Chair. So do we have for the amount awarded on the actual grant paper of 250? Do we have a proposer and seconder for that? And then Councillor Devlin's amendment.
Yeah, I'll second that. Chair, I'm happy to second it. I think Maureen's proposing it to go to the full amount.
I'm proposing for 1,500, Kenny. It's for the initial.
I've already seconded that.
I'm putting an amendment forward. Forward.
Yeah. So Maureen's putting the amendment, and the actual proposer is the 250. So can we just go with the amendment, Elizabeth Ann?
Do we have, if it's going to a vote, because unless the whole committee is in agreement with Councillor Devlin's suggestion, I don't know if we have, for the actual proposal of 250, if we have a proposer and seconder for that, and then it would go to vote.
Well, I think this was one of the discussions we actually had at the pre-meeting.
It was, yeah.
So
yourself and the deputy at the meeting had agreed that. So I don't know if you have a second, if you're going with the £250 and if you have a seconder for that.
I would rather go with the proposal of the amendment, actually, based on the fact that we've got so much money left over.
Do we have agreement with for the rest of the committee then?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Well done, Maureen.
Chair, sorry, just with regards to the other community grants on the paper.
I'm just going to, can I just move and block the rest of the grants? Can I have a seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
Okay. And I've got agreement, they're all moved.
Sorry, Chair, if you can just bear with me just 1 second. Sorry about. Sorry, I'm just getting some advice here. So is everybody in agreement that for application B, Bothwell and Uddingston Menshed, that if they're going to be awarded the full amount? So are all members here agreed with that?
Yeah, we said that we're agreed.
You're all agreed. You're all agreed. And for applications A, C, D, E and F, are you happy to move the amount awarded as noted on the paper?
Yes. Agreed.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Now, I've no other urgent business to deal with, so I declare the meeting closed now.
Whoa, Mary.
Thank you for your attendance.
Right.
Mary, my hand's been up for about 5 minutes.
Sorry. Right, sorry. Andrew,
Can I come,
Andy,
can I come in now?
So you can.
That's okay, Mary. Thank you very much. Now, my question is this. Who decides the amount of the grant, and what criteria do they use to determine the amount on each grant?
Elizabeth Ann, can I pass that to you?
Yes, certainly, Chair. So for the Community Grants Councillor, we do have a guidance document which details categories of spend, categories that aren't supported, and who can apply for a community grant, and those who are not eligible. So we do have a guidance document. Officers will work to that document, and that will then be presented to the Chair and the Deputy, and then subsequently the relevant area committees, and at that point it is within the area committee's gift to agree or suggest another amount. But at the moment we do have a guidance document that we do work to, and that's the criteria that we apply. For example, as was mentioned earlier, traditionally for a startup grant the amount awarded has been £250. So that's just as one example, Councillor.
Okay, thank you for that. I would suggest, Chair, that we have a look at the amount of grants applicable to each application, as opposed to having a set amount, quite frankly. For example, for the start-up of £250, if you don't mind. Thanks.
Okay, is that a proposal you're putting forward then, Andy?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, can I have a seconder for Andy's proposal?
I'll second that.
Okay, so is that all right, Elizabeth Ann? That'll be the situation going forward?
Certainly. So we only have one more committee meeting left in this cycle. So I don't know, is this going to a vote, or is that just for the next meeting that you want to...
Do you want that just for the next meeting, Andy, or do you want that to be the norm?
I want it to be standard, quite frankly, even though there's a new council next year. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so I'll put that to a vote. He's got a mover and a second. Maureen, you want to come in?
I think, obviously we're just one area committee, and so there would need to be a discussion in some broader policy areas, isn't it? So I suspect, I'm not absolutely sure, somebody can keep me right, but it would probably need to kind of be discussed and then brought forward to, for example, the exec to make a policy decision like that. But I don't know, somebody can guide us and keep us right on it.
Elizabeth Ann, can you guide us on this?
I think it would, Chair, I think it would have to go to another committee. I don't think it's something that we could make a decision on at this particular committee.
Okay.
But it's certainly something I can take away and get back to the committee with.
Yes, yeah, that would be helpful. On you go, Andy.
Mary, on that basis, yeah, I'll accept that. I'll take it for this committee, the Hamilton Area Committee, for the next meeting, right? Any further discussion for future councils, yeah, I would appreciate going to all the area committees. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair, we have Councillor Thompson has his hand up as well.
And you come back.
Right, thanks. I'll make it brief. First of all, Maureen Devlin, I'm going to ask her to come and see me, my bank manager. Well done, Maureen, there. The other thing is, could somebody give me the best contact person for participatory budget for the schools for education? Could somebody give me a name, a contact number? If
Laura?
Email me, it would be fantastic. Right, thank you.
Elizabeth Ann will email you. Is it Laura? Elizabeth Ann?
Yeah, Laura Mitchell's been our representative from Education Resources at this
Can
committee.
You email her?
Yeah,
email address to Bert.
Certainly, Chair.
Right, thanks very much, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if these are just legacy hands from councillors Carmichael and Thompson.
Andy, is that a legacy hand?
Yes, Mary. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Legacy hand, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. So there's no other business for this meeting, and I now declare the meeting closed. And thank you for all for your attendance. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks to the chair. Thanks to the chair.
Thanks, Chair. Bye. Bye-bye.